Welcome to our annual MLK Convocation. As we begin, we're going to have the invocation by Saad Jalisi, followed by the national anthem. May we all stand.
Please pray with me. On this joyous day, Lord, we are here to celebrate the life of the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. All praise is due to God, the Lord of the worlds, the beneficent, the merciful, Master of the day of judgment. Thee do we serve, and thee do we beseech for help. Keep us on the right path, the path of those whom thou hast bestowed favors, not the path of those upon whom thy wrath is brought down, nor of those who go astray. Amen.
Can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Callan Lan is a traditional Welsh song, which means a clean or a pure heart. This song is about being true to yourself. We rejoice in a pure heart when it is full of goodness and love. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. reminded us that we have choices to make. We can allow ourselves to hate, or we can choose to let love overcome it all. In his own words, I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. May we be reminded of these powerful words through this music. the great Charlie Parker wrote this selection in 1945, a period when famous African-American musicians were not allowed to stay in certain hotels, eat in certain restaurants, or enter the front of the venues where they performed. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s vision for America remains in his words, "We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy." In 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, expressing a vision of equality for all. We feel that now is the time.
Now is the time. We're now going to have another musical rendition, and this is a special group, the Middlemen, the Upper School Glee Club, and the Trouble Tees, Going Up Yonder.
If anybody asks you where I'm going, soon. So if you wanna know where I'm going, where I'm going,
Thank you, gentlemen, for that singing, and thanks to all the musicians. Mr. Flint, thanks for handling everything behind the scenes to make us sound okay, and thanks to the string ensemble for putting up with my flail, and it was a lot of fun to be with you. And then finally, a thanks to the buildings and ground staff who always are working overtime to make sure these kinds of things are set up and ready to go. We always appreciate their efforts. So thank you very much. And then Mr. Foreman and Dr. Wilson, thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to have you, and we look forward to hearing from you in just a moment. Before we get to our guest speaker, though, I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about what this day and this celebration might mean for Gilman. And then we want to watch, or I want us to watch, a brief film as well in conjunction with that message. So at our Founders Day graduation ceremony in 1968, June of 1968, which was just 2 months after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., 4 seniors, Greg Emery, David Robinson, Stuart Sims, and Willard Wiggins, became the first black graduates of Gilman, all 4 of them members of the class of 1968. And as most of you, I think, know, this past October, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of that historic moment for our school. Because that graduation ceremony in June of 1968 put an exclamation point on the opening of the school's doors to a much wider and more inclusive representation of our world. In a lot of ways, it also represented the coming to life of Dr. King's dream right here on Roland Avenue and Northern Parkway. Because Dr. King dreamed that all people, that people of all colors and faiths and backgrounds and beliefs could and would come together and live more harmoniously, than they had been. And we haven't necessarily achieved that ideal yet. We're still working towards it. But I stand here absolutely confident and believing that we've made a ton of progress. We've made a ton of progress towards reaching that ideal. And now, by virtually any measure, if you look around here, if you look at Gilman and who we are as a school and who we represent as a slice of humanity, right? Our student body, our community in 2019, almost 51 years later now, is more diverse than I would imagine the pioneers of the 1960s could possibly have fathomed. Today, we welcome boys of multiple hues and ethnicities and religions, orientations, recognizing that the more textured our fabric, the more impactful our experience. And so as part of that celebration in October, a film was produced to tell the story of those 4 students and the legacy of their pioneering spirit and efforts. And we thought it'd be really fitting today to show everybody that film. Not everybody has seen it at this point, as a way of honoring Dr. King and the movement that he helped to lead. Mr. Flint, cue the film.
I grew up in West Baltimore.
There weren't a lot of well-to-do folks living in my neighborhood.
We didn't venture too far out.
I didn't know I was poor till somebody told me.
My dad was asking around about the best school for a boy in Baltimore, and he was told it's Gilman.
I went home that evening and told my mother that I had been interviewed by somebody from Gilman. She almost fell off the hassock. I didn't know what the hell was going on.
They don't really take black kids.
People that look like me were not allowed in Roland Park.
I mean, I came to a school literally where my grandmother was actually working for a family that had students here.
My father, he went and found out, well, we'll see about that.
It was a very interesting time. It really was. It was very strange.
March on Washington, boom, 64 Civil Rights Act, boom, 65 Watts, boom, 66 a lot of strife. and controversy throughout the country.
April of '68, Martin Luther King was assassinated, and all hell broke loose.
We hadn't even gotten home from school yet.
Buildings being burned,
There was a curfew that was being established.
and it was a race riot.
Baltimore was a pretty racially polarized place.
Well, I was teaching up on the 3rd floor of public schools in 91. So I went down, and these 2 white fellas there had trench coats on because of the time of the year it was, and it was Reddy Finney and Bill Campbell.
Reddy Finney was one of the strongest influences on me.
He asked me if I'd be willing to come to Gilman.
Gilman was on the forefront of diversity work.
We must, more than ever before, emphasize values, the importance of values.
He didn't see color. He saw a human being that needed assistance, who needed help, and he helped them, whether they were poor whites, poor Asians, poor whatever. They needed help, they showed promise, he wanted to help them.
I caught a bus that was about a 45, 50-minute ride from where I was to here. I caught 3.
We'd go in sometime, visit kids at the home, try to get parents to understand why this kid needed a quiet place to study.
It was far more academically rigorous than anything I'd ever been exposed to before.
Getting off the bus at night at 6:45 and coming home with the books, and the guys on the street saying, "Can you come out?" And no, I can't. Not tonight.
There was an expectation that you'd be excellent in the classroom and excellent on the athletic field.
You had to participate in athletics. You guys look like football players, you gotta play football.
I always fancied myself as having good catching ability, so went out for end.
We had football practice every day, and we had games on Friday afternoons and evenings.
I was named the head track coach in 1988. A white gentleman walked up to me and said, "Coach Foreman, I know the track programs you've had in Baltimore City Public Schools, you'll never make track popular here."
And I'll never forget, we were playing a private school. There was a noticeable silence when we got off the bus, and I'm looking around and I'm thinking, why is everybody so quiet? And I think, and it became apparent it's because of me, and so there's a lot of, discussion, and a couple of people on the other side of the line are calling myself and the tackle next to me names, and then the guy who's fullback, who's Jewish, they're calling him names.
And I said, "Sir, I appreciate your conversation, but when I'm finished, they're gonna have to build another trophy case to put the trophies that I'm gonna bring in here with the track program."
So we gave some destructive lessons to defensive tackle who remained nameless, who was on the other side.
Over the years, I have at least 17 championships in the MIAA, MSA. You can't win a championship in Baltimore City without running through Gilman.
We didn't prevail in the game, but we prevailed as a team, and that was important.
I think any kid, if you're exposed to different cultures, it's a plus. It's a completely different environment. It's a positive environment. They will learn from that majority group, and that majority group will be learning from you.
I think a student's success cannot be predicted by any social or cultural identifier.
My dad, when he arrived at his school, he had no shoes, and he remembers that he was made fun of. And what my parents have to do to make the jump to come to this country, give us the opportunity to study in such an amazing institution, and it's hard to carry that weight all the time.
Gilman was like a safe haven for me.
When you come here, you're connected in giving back and moving forward. And now you look at our yearbook, you open up that yearbook and you see the shape of a class.
My memory of going to Gilman and being a student athlete here was one of acceptance, inclusion.
Not long ago, a black student could not be here, a Jewish student could not be here, and a gay student would be living in fear all the time.
I am going to push even harder and work even harder and do everything I can, because people who look like me, people who don't look like me, people who come from different cultures and different ethnicities do deserve a great education.
And I hope the boys who graduate from Gilman, who leave Gilman, that they're going out into the world as people who embrace difference.
In order to carry on what I believe that legacy is of diversity, it's kind of like an ambassadorship. Like I have to show what my experience is and be as engaging as possible in the community to bring that to the institution.
You got to make sure that where you are, the impact is being felt. The movement is still going forward. Those kids still need us to be here to do what we do. We're on the right path.
I'm very proud of where Gilman is today.
And when I go around now and see my portrait up on the wall, I think someone thought I did a good job and have some type of respect for me.
If you had asked me the day I graduated what I thought Gilman would look like in 50 years, I never would have come to where it actually is.
So boys, men, and women of Gilman, as we celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. over this weekend, and I hope over longer periods of time throughout the calendar year, let's do that with great pride in what Gilman has become. Let's do it recognizing that we still have work to do. And let's do that hopeful of what we can become and what role we can play in making that progress. So now I'd like to introduce Noah Seth, who will introduce our guest speaker. Noah?
Doctor of Education David Wilson, the 10th president of Morgan State University, has a long record of accomplishment and more than 30 years of experience in higher education administration. Dr. Wilson holds 4 academic degrees, a BS in political science and a Master of Science in Education from Tuskegee University, an EDM in Education Planning and Administration from Harvard University, and an EDD in Administration Planning and Social Policy, also from Harvard University. He came to Morgan from the University of Wisconsin, where he was chancellor of both the University of Wisconsin Colleges and the University of Wisconsin Extension. Before that, he held numerous other administrative posts in academia, including vice president for university outreach and associate provost at Auburn University, and associate provost at Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey. Dr. Wilson's tenure as Morgan's president, which began on July 1st, 2010, has been characterized by great aims for the university. Dr. Wilson has authored 2 books and more than 20 articles published in scholarly journals. Among the many honors and recognitions he has received for his work, he was named one of the nation's top 100 leaders in higher education by the American Association for Higher Education in 1998. He was selected as one of the Daily Record newspaper's influential Marylanders for 2011 and is honored by the University of Alabama with an award for outstanding leadership and engaged scholarship in 2011. In January of 2018, the Lumina Foundation elected Dr. Wilson to serve on its board of directors. Prior to this election, the U.S. Undersecretary for Commerce, Secretary of State for Commerce, Standards and Technology had appointed him to serve a 3-year term as a member of the National Institute of Standards and Technology's Visiting Committee on Advanced Technology. He's a former chairman of the HBCU China Network, a member of the Maryland Cybersecurity Council and the Maryland Longitudinal Data System Governing Board, and serves on the board of directors of the Greater Baltimore Committee, the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, and the Association of American Colleges and Universities. In 2010, former President Barack Obama appointed him to his 11-member board of advisors on historically black colleges and universities. Dr. Wilson served on the board of United Way of Central Maryland. Dr. Wilson's achievements as leader of Maryland's preeminent public urban research university have clearly been strong. But it is the character he brings to the presidency, a character shaped by the intangibles of his background that is perhaps most impressive of all. Dr. Wilson grew up with 10 siblings on a sharecropper farm outside the small town of McKinley, Alabama. Through hard work, tenacity, and the encouragement of his father and his teachers, he became the first person in his family to attend college. Dr. Wilson builds upon that legacy as the proud father of Nair Brown Wilson, a current student majoring in business administration at Morgan. Dr. Wilson's educational philosophy is to put the student's experience first. As a leader, he is a consensus builder and a strong believer in the transparency of process. His goal is to make Morgan a leader in producing the next wave of innovators in the United States. Morgan State University administers the Lily Mae Carroll Jackson Museum on Utah Place, celebrating a founding chair of the NAACP and legendary civil rights leader. She is also the mother of Juanita Jackson Mitchell, who married Clarence Mitchell, a Gilman alum. A section of this museum is dedicated to Lily's partnership with Margaret Thomas Carey, leading Quaker advocate for civil rights. Together, they mounted a national drive to enact anti-lynching legislation. Margaret was the sister of M. Carey Thomas, founder of the Bryn Mawr School, and the sister-in-law of our founder, Anne Gilbert Carey. Former Gilman board member President Dick Emery, class of 1931, also served on the Morgan State University Board of Trustees, succeeding Carl Murphy as chair in 1967. Now, with all of these accomplishments, please join me in welcoming the esteemed Dr. David Wilson, president of Morgan State University.
Good afternoon. I'm struggling with a cold a little bit, and so please bear with me this afternoon. But thank you very much, Seth, for that incredible introduction and warm welcome. I do want to ask you to join me in giving another round of applause for this terrific musical talent that we've heard here. It's really, really world-class and represents Gilman very well. To Headmaster Henry Smythe, members of the faculty, young gentlemen of the student body, ladies and gentlemen, I really am greatly honored to join you this afternoon here at Gilman School, one of the city's most distinguished institutions of learning, now in its 122nd year, with over 8,000 graduates in positions of responsibility and leadership throughout the city of Baltimore, throughout the state of Maryland, and throughout the United States of America. For well over a century, you have committed yourselves to helping boys of promise grow into men of character by educating them in mind, in body, and in spirit. And I applaud you for your great, tremendous success in doing so. I'm especially pleased to be with you today as you gather to pay homage to an individual who was the ultimate difference maker and who changed the world forever, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King was an international leader, and he led at a time when we needed him the most. He embodied the qualities that you here at Gilman have identified as constituting, quote, what it means to be Gilman. Those qualities of honor, integrity, respect, humility, and excellence. And I am pleased to be at Gilman today, where those qualities are treasured and where the great legacy of Dr. King is appreciated. And so this afternoon, in my comments, I want to try, at least, and inspire many of you, your students, over 150 faculty members, many supporters, especially the young men who will head off to college this year and next year in particular. I want to inspire you to commit your lives today and every day to an agenda that is aimed at making things better for you, for your family, for your community, for your city, for your state, for this nation, and this world. I want to shape my comments around the topic, how to become a difference maker in the way that Dr. King was a difference maker. Now, I'm reminded that telling you that you need to make a difference in your life is never going to be as effective as showing you that you can make such a difference. A good example, it has been said, has twice the value of just simply good advice. And so this afternoon, I want to share with you a few things about how really you can make a difference and be a difference maker, and then conclude my remarks with a little bit more about what Seth introduced. Me. Who am I beyond being president at Morgan and academic degrees and board service that was inspired by the person that we are gathered here to honor? And so let me start this way. Yeah, I wonder, young men, I wonder what the world would be like today if it were not for the people who had come before us, like you saw in the film here, one of whom, Mr. Sims, is a very dear friend of mine, what the world would be like if they did not dare to make a difference. That's what they did in 1968. They dared to make a difference, and as a result of that, they are difference makers. They are what I'm talking about. But what progress could or should mankind have made if someone had not thought outside of the box? And what would our condition be if there hadn't been people, in the words of George Bernard Shaw, who not only saw things as they were and asked why, but dreamed things that never were and asked why not? Where would we be today if people throughout the centuries and the millennial had not challenged the status quo, if they had not challenged those unjust laws as King did, if they had not envisioned a better future and then worked tirelessly to achieve it? I can't even imagine where we would be if that had not happened, if these gentlemen had not done what they did in 1968. Where would Gilman be? They had courage. They dreamed things that never were and asked, why not? And so the answer may be suggested in this antidote that I'll share with you. And the antidote goes like this. So, once upon a time, there was a man who was walking along the streets of a city. And this man became so discouraged by all of the misery and the pain and the suffering that he saw amongst the people there. And in his mind, this man lamented this condition, and then he looked up and he questioned God. And he said, now, God, why do you allow such suffering to exist? And God, why haven't you done something about it? Well, God thought about it, and then he answered this man quickly. And he said, my son, I have done something about it. I made you. And so therein, my young friends, lies the answer to this question this afternoon. In my view, we have been created, we have been empowered, we have been directed, we have been given an obligation to make a difference in this world. That is why we are here. That is our purpose. It is our duty. It has been said that life is God's gift to us. What we do with our lives is our gift to God. And so this afternoon, I speak of giving back during your life in order to make a difference with it, because so much has been given to us. We all have a decision to make in life, and that decision is equally critical for you, our youth, with all of these challenges that surround you today and all of the peer pressures that you experience, these things you face constantly. But I think amidst all the challenges, all the peer pressures, you have to step back sometime and ask yourself some simple questions in order to make sure that the noise will never, ever, ever drown out the signal. And so the first question is simply, do I really want to be a difference maker? Do I really want to make this incredible difference with my life? And if the answer is yes, and I certainly hope that it will be, then the next question is, well, how do I do that? How do I go about doing that in the likes of the late Dr. King? Well, I can say to you that there's no magical formula for becoming a difference maker, and I do not propose to give you a magical formula this afternoon. However, there seems to me, though, to be a few common building blocks upon which I think you would be wise to understand. First and foremost, I think, looking at my own personal experience, that you make a difference first by starting with yourself. And you can make no greater difference or have any more effective and impact than to decide that you, me, I want to be a better person, and that you want to be the best that you can be. And the time to begin to do that is now. As Anne Frank reminded us, how wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world, to make a difference. You can decide to do that in this instance, in this minute. You do not need to count the days before you begin this process. Instead, you need to make your days count by beginning today. And so young people, young citizens of the world, and our future leaders, here are a few things you might want to do in order to position yourselves to become those difference makers. First, as you hear every single day here at Gilman, you have to get a great education. Education leads to greater understanding. Education is enlightening. If indeed Confucius were right when he said, ignorance is the night of the mind, a night without moon and a night without stars, then education has to be that which will lead us out of that night, lead us out of that darkness. Education is empowering. Education makes us a people who are easy to lead but difficult to drive, easy to govern but impossible to enslave. In this century, it is virtually impossible for young people to prepare themselves for leadership or for making a significant difference in any aspect of life without a great education. And so I encourage you to go as far as you can in your learning, not just to get that wonderful sheepskin here at Gilman, not just to head off and get that baccalaureate degree, but to go as far as your education would take you, masters and doctorates and MDs and JDs and Master of Arts in Teaching and Arts and whatever. Prepare yourself to the fullest. I'm fond of saying at Morgan that we are growing the future and preparing our students to lead the world, because you are the future everything. You're the future college professors. You're the future headmasters. You're the future presidents and engineers and scientists and doctors and dentists and teachers and presidents of the United States of America or secretaries general of the United Nations. That's you. And I would encourage you to understand that and prepare yourself well for that every single day. Don't lose a second. Don't lose a minute. And certainly don't lose a day. The second way in which I think you can position yourself to be these difference makers is that, once again, my own experience. I am in love with hard work. There's nothing wrong with working hard. Now, we have a museum here in Baltimore, the Reginald Lewis Museum, and I read Mr. Lewis's biography. I'm not advocating this, but you know what? Reginald Lewis worked 90 hours a week. He understood what it really meant to work hard and to break down barriers, break down ceilings, if you will, and continue to elevate. And so, in some respects, I think, as I said to my own son, I think sometimes, we made some things a little bit too easy for his generation. I didn't get into booze on that. I think that the things that our parents had to work so hard for and so diligently for can now be acquired with the push of a button on a computer, a cell phone, or some other magical device of information technology. Modern technology has put virtually everything at our fingertips, and we must be careful not to allow these conveniences, as we call them, to instill in us, in you young people, an unfriendliness toward each other, toward hard work, toward dialogue, toward communication and understanding. I believe that hard work and smart work are essential to becoming difference makers. And so one of my recently retired professors at Morgan is known for saying that the only place where success comes before work is in the dictionary. And so work first, if you will, and then success will follow. And so last, in terms of things that I put in front of you to be a difference maker, it is we have to know who we are. We have to know ourselves. And then when we know ourselves, we have to love who we know. We have to love ourselves. And then we have to respect that which we know and which we love. And so difference makers almost invariably believe in themselves. I believe in me. I believe in my son. I believe in my family. But I also want them to believe in themselves. Difference makers know who they are. Difference makers are anchored in an understanding clearly of what our values are, what we stand for, and difference makers know that along the way, they are the descendants of a long caravan of distinguished ancestors who, despite all of these odds against them, proved themselves capable of doing anything. They proved themselves capable of production and innovation and discovery and creation and reflection and rumination and theorizing and achievements that are as great as any people who ever lived. And so, what I'm saying to you this afternoon, Gilman, is that I want you to always place a high value on your lives. We must hold ourselves in high esteem. We must respect our very being and sense the beauty within us. And we must cherish that beauty. I encourage you to display, if you're not doing it already, your inner beauty, and refrain from engaging in activities and displaying characteristics that negatively reflect on you or your school or your family or your community. I encourage you to set lofty goals for yourselves and to work extraordinarily hard to achieve them. I encourage you to be the model of good character and good judgment and to live each day the values of what it means to be Gilman. I encourage you to do that. And above all, I encourage you to commit yourselves to excellence. You should not settle for being anything short of the best that you can be. The best. There's no excuse for mediocrity. There's no excuse for not committing yourselves to that standard. People who make a difference are people who go what we call the extra mile. And you can believe me when I say this, is that when you start going the extra mile, I've found that that stretch of the road is never, ever crowded. And so go the extra mile. And so now that I've kind of given you a few building blocks, let me conclude my remarks on a more personal level. You know, I was not supposed to be standing here today at Gilman as a keynote speaker for the Martin Luther King Convocation. I was not supposed to do any of the things that you heard. Because here I am, growing up in rural Alabama on a little red dirt road in a little shanty, a little two-room, quote-unquote, shotgun house with no electricity and no plumbing and none of the so-called modern conveniences, no telephone, youngest of 10 children, growing up on a sharecropper's farm in Alabama. And my father, we had to pick cotton and pick okra. And there was no law in Alabama that said black children must go to school. And so, of course, my father did not send us to school on a regular basis. So he created this system where he would send us to school 3 days one week and we would stay out 2, and he would reverse it the following week. And so one day, as I was in the 6th grade, and I understand we had the 6th graders over here who were singing, wonderful. I was in the 6th grade on one of those 3 days that I was in school. And my 6th grade teacher was the late Mrs. Luvinia Abernathy Coates, the sister of the late Ralph David Abernathy. And she said to me, David, you know, won't you stop by my desk when class is over? I want to say something to you. And I did, and she said, you know, let me tell you something. She said, you need to go home and have a conversation with your father. And you need to tell him that if he can figure out a way to send you to school 5 days a week, I think you can go to college. I never heard the word college before. It was like, college? Are you kidding me? So I came home, and I went to my father, and I said, Daddy, do you know what Mrs. Coates said to me today? He said, well, boy, what? I said, she said that if you could figure out a way to send me to school 5 days a week, I can go to college. So I want to take you back, young people. Not as far back as 1968. It was in the 70s. But everything is contextual. And so my father looked at me, and he said, let me tell you something. He said, college is for white people. And we never spoke about it again, except that I started to go to school 5 days a week when I was in the 7th grade. And I got really, in the vernacular, turned on by the magic of education, by how transformational education could be. I wanted to be a difference maker. And so I hardly missed a day of school from 7th grade because I saw something magical at the end of the tunnel. So then, as I was about to finish high school at a place called Marengo County Training School in Alabama, because many of the high schools for blacks in Alabama were called training schools, not high schools. And I was accepted to college. I only applied to one, and that was Tuskegee. That was my dream school. Tuskegee, there was no institution in this entire world that was better than Tuskegee Institute. And by a miracle, they admitted me. And when I got up that morning and began to pack my little bag, didn't have much, we didn't have a car, to get a ride to Tuskegee, about 200 miles away, with the parents of my high school classmate, I heard my father get up in the adjacent room. And he made his way into the living room. He had on these overalls. He had a strap that was attached and one that was loose across his shoulder. And he said, David, he said, let me tell you something. He said, son, he said, I'm so proud of you. He said, you're about to do something that no one in this family has ever done. You're about to go to college. He said, 5 years ago, you told me that you wanted to go to college. Do you recall what I said to you? I said, of course, Daddy, I recalled, because it was so painful. And he said, well, let me tell you what I was thinking. He said, what I was thinking was, how in the heck am I ever going to pay for you to go to college? But I want you to know that I've been saving for this day. He said, I've been saving for the day when I would see my little David go out that front door to college. And so he reached his hands in his overalls, and he pulled out something that he called a piece of money, and he folded it, and he folded it, and he asked me to hold out my hand, and I did, and he put that piece of money in my hand so hard, I thought it was actually going to go through my hand. And I looked in his face, and he was crying. And it was the first time I'd ever seen my father cry. And he said, now this is what I've saved up for 5 years. I want a good return on my investment. And I said, Daddy, I will. I'll give you that return. So I went out on the front porch as the sun was coming up, opened my hand, and there in the middle of my hand was a crisp $5 bill. That was all that he had been able to save for 5 years to send me to college. And so I never looked back except to put in front of me those things that will continue to motivate and inspire me toward being a difference maker. And I went from this institution to that institution, to this institution, to that institution, and had remarkable tenures at all of them. But during the summer of 2010, I showed up on the campus of Morgan State University. And as I walked that campus, my father, who had passed away 15 years earlier, started talking to me in my head. And he said, now, David, it's payback time. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I need a return on my investment, and this is the place for you to do it. And I said, what? But you gave me $5. And my tuition at the time was $2,000. What is it you want me to repay? And he said, you'll figure it out. And so on October the 21st, 2010, as I was making my way across campus to be officially inaugurated as the 10th president of Morgan State University, and got up to the podium like this, I had no idea what I was going to say. And he said, do it now. And I made a gift to Morgan of $100,000 and started the $5 scholarship program at Morgan in honor of my father, a program that has now grown to about $1.5 million, where we use the scholarships to enable students with incredible promise, students who want to be a difference maker, students who see what Dr. King saw to reach that goal. And so I invite all of you, young boys, young men, I thank you for your patience. I really do invite you to embrace excellence, know yourselves, respect yourselves, and really live every single day the great values of Gilman, and you too are well on your way to being that difference maker. God bless you, and thank you very much for having me today.
Most people remember when they first heard it. Perhaps it was elementary school, church, a college graduation, or special family occasion. For more than 100 years, Lift Every Voice and Sing has been a staple musical celebration of Black excellence and pride in finding ways to survive and thrive in America. But where did this song originate? And how are so many of us able to hum at least the first stanza from memory for so many years later? Here's some background. Lift Every Voice and Sing started as a poem. It was first recited in the year 1900 by 500 school children at the all-black Stanton School in Jacksonville, Florida, as a tribute to President Abraham Lincoln's birthday. James Weldon Johnson, a civil rights activist, lawyer, and principal of the Stanton School, wrote Lift Every Voice and Sing to introduce the famed educator Booker T. Washington, who was visiting the school at the time. Johnson's brother, John Rosamond Johnson, put the song to music, and it officially became a song. In 1919, the NAACP adopted the song as its official Black national anthem, and it enjoyed widespread distribution and celebration. According to historians, Lift Every Voice and Sing experienced a resurgence during the Civil Rights Movement, and many parents, churches, and predominantly Black schools went out of their way to ensure that their children knew the words. A remake of Lift Every Voice and Sing was done in the 1990s by Melba Moore with fellow R&B artists like Stevie Wonder, Anita Baker, Dionne Warwick, Bobby Brown. A stanza from the song was also recited by Reverend Joseph E. Lowry during the benediction at President Barack Obama's first inauguration in 2009. Of course, the song hasn't been free from controversy. In 2008, jazz singer Renee Mary sang words from Lift Every Voice and Sing instead of the Star Spangled Banner at Denver State of the City Address, which led to some criticism. Despite these criticisms, its lyrics are a reminder for Black Americans that each generation has had to lift their own voices to demand and protect their rights. It's a song we can still sing today and stand for with pride. At this time, we ask everyone who wishes to stand to do so, as it is customary tradition for our national anthem. Thank you.
Please pray with me. I seek refuge in the Lord of mankind, the sovereign of mankind, the God of mankind, from the evil of the retreating whisperer who whispers evil into the breasts of mankind, from among the demons in mankind. Lord, let us remember Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as a hero to all peoples. Let us remember him as a man who did God's work and as a man who faced the world against all odds. Amen.